The clock on the kitchen wall read 9:45 p.m. when Emily heard the front door open. The doorknob turned slowly, as if Ryan himself hesitated to enter. He was late again. It was starting to become a routine. She pretended not to notice, continuing to wash the dishes while feeling her stomach tighten with anxiety. In recent months, his behavior had changed in a disturbing way. Before, Ryan always came home excited, sharing stories about work, his colleagues, and the challenges of the day. Now, he limited himself to murmuring an excuse, something vague like, "It was a busy day." Emily felt the distance grow like a shadow over their marriage. She knew something was wrong, but she didn't know how to break down the invisible wall that had risen between them. "How was work?" she asked, feigning casualness, her hands still submerged in the water. Ryan glanced at her for a brief second, his eyes tired, but the answer was the same as always. Exhausting. He dropped his briefcase on the table and went straight to the bathroom without looking back. The sound of the door closing echoed through the house. Emily dried her hands on the dish towel and stood still for a few seconds, staring at the reflection of the ceiling light in the wet sink. Everything seemed so banal, yet so wrong. In the following days, the tension only increased. Ryan arrived home later and was always on his phone, exchanging messages that he quickly deleted. When Emily asked who it was, he merely sighed, saying it was work stuff. However, she began to notice other details: dinners out, excuses for not being home, the quick, fake smiles he gave whenever he realized he was being watched. Emily tried to convince herself it was just paranoia, but something inside her gnawed at her. The Ryan she married was disappearing, and a stranger was taking his place. One night, after yet another uncomfortable silence at dinner, Emily saw a notification on Ryan's phone, which he had carelessly left on the table while he took a shower. It was a short message from an unknown number. "I hope you enjoyed last night." Her heart raced. The air seemed to vanish from the room. Emily knew she shouldn't, but curiosity was stronger. She picked up the phone and opened the conversation. What she saw made her world collapse. The exchanged messages between Ryan and an unknown woman were too intimate, laden with promises and secrets. Shock turned into panic, and soon into anger. Feeling her hands tremble, she locked the screen and returned the phone to the table before he came out of the bathroom. Now, she had a decision to make. Emily couldn't sleep that night. The images of the messages she had read spun in her mind like an endless horror movie. The bedroom, which once felt like a sanctuary of tranquility, had now become suffocating. Ryan lay beside her, facing away, breathing calmly as if nothing were out of place. But for Emily, the chasm between them felt wider and darker with each passing minute. She spent hours staring at the ceiling, struggling to control the whirlwind of emotions consuming her. How could he do this? How did everything come to this point? The silence in the room was broken only by the constant sound of the fan in the corner, lazily spinning while Emily felt her mind drift into possibilities. Should she confront him? But how? What if he lied again? When the sun finally began to rise over Chicago, she had made up her mind. She couldn't live in doubt. She needed answers. And she would need help. The next morning, as Ryan hurried out, mumbling something about an important meeting, Emily picked up the phone and called Sarah, her longtime friend. She was the only person Emily trusted enough to share this. Sarah had always been direct but had a big heart, and Emily knew she would listen. "Hey, is everything okay?" Sarah asked, her voice soft and concerned. Emily hesitated for a moment, feeling a lump in her throat, but then it all came out at once. "I think Ryan is cheating on me, Sarah." Emily's voice trembled. On the other end of the line, there was a moment of silence, followed by a sigh. "Oh, are you sure? What makes you think that?" "I saw messages, between him and another woman." "Something is going on, Sarah, I know it is." The words spilled out quickly, heavy with frustration and fear. Sarah remained silent for a few moments, absorbing the information. "Okay, listen," she began, her voice firm yet understanding. "I know you must be devastated, but before anything else, you need to talk to him. You can't live like this, You need to confront him directly." Emily knew her friend was right, but the thought of facing Ryan with what she had discovered left her paralyzed with fear. What if he denied it? What if he said it was all in her head? Or worse, what if he confirmed that he was, in fact, involved with another woman? And what if he... Emily started but couldn't finish the sentence. You have to be prepared for anything, Sarah continued. But you deserve the truth, Em. You can't let this eat you alive. With Sarah's support, Emily felt a fleeting wave of courage. She would need strength to face Ryan, but she knew she couldn't postpone it any longer. That night, after another day of Ryan coming home late and avoiding any prolonged conversation, Emily felt the tension in the air was about to explode. It was now or never. As he placed the keys on the table and headed for the bedroom, Emily finally broke the silence. Ryan, we need to talk. He stopped mid-stride, not turning to look at her. The words hung in the air for a few seconds before he sighed, seeming annoyed. About what? He asked, devoid of emotion, as if he already knew what was coming. I saw the messages on your phone. I know you're seeing another woman. Ryan froze. For a brief moment, the silence between them felt suffocating until he finally turned to face her. His expression was tense, his eyes narrowed. What are you saying, Emily? That you're spying on me now? His voice came out cold, almost dismissive. Emily felt her blood boil. He was deflecting, trying to put her on the defensive, but she couldn't let that happen. This isn't about that, Ryan, she shot back, her voice trembling with anger. I saw the messages. I know you're hiding something from me. For a moment, Ryan seemed to hesitate, but he quickly returned to a defensive posture. Emily, you're exaggerating. This is nothing, just work talk. He took a step toward the bedroom door, as if trying to end the discussion. But Emily wasn't ready to let it slide. Work talk? I hope you enjoyed last night as work talk now. Her voice rose, heart racing as emotions boiled over. Ryan turned abruptly, and for the first time that night, he looked genuinely shaken. I'm overwhelmed, Emily. Things at work are a mess, and sometimes I need to vent to someone, okay? His voice trembled slightly, but he still avoided looking directly into her eyes. So you go to another woman to vent? Emily retorted, incredulous. It's not like that, it's not what you think. Ryan tried to justify, but his voice faltered. Emily knew he was lying, knew he was hiding something, but she wasn't sure how deep it went. She took a step back, feeling a wave of disappointment and despair wash over her. She couldn't bear to look at him anymore. The man she once loved now felt like a stranger. If it's not what I'm thinking, then tell me, Ryan. Tell me what's really going on. Her voice came out low, almost pleading. Ryan remained silent, unable to respond. And in that moment, Emily knew that the answer she feared was the truth. She just didn't know how deep the hole he had dug himself was. The silence that followed Emily's last question was deafening. Ryan, with his gaze down and trembling hands, seemed to struggle internally between continuing to hide the truth or finally confessing. For Emily, that moment of hesitation confirmed that something deeper was wrong. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but found herself paralyzed, observing every subtle movement of her husband. Finally, Ryan shook his head slowly, as if defeated by an invisible force. Emily. He began, his voice softer, almost pleading. I never wanted this to happen. I made a mistake. His voice faltered, and he rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding her eyes. The anger Emily felt began to mix with a sharp pain, like a wound being slowly reopened. It was exactly what she feared, but hearing those words directly from Ryan made the impact devastating. What are you saying, Ryan? The question slipped from her lips almost as a whisper, as she struggled to hold back the tears forming in her eyes. Ryan took a deep breath, as if he needed strength to continue. He finally lifted his gaze and met Emily's eyes, but they no longer held the same firmness as before. They were filled with guilt. He started, but his voice broke before he could finish the sentence. I got involved with someone, Emily. It was just once. The words came out quickly, as if he wanted to get rid of them as fast as possible. I don't know why I did it. It was a moment of weakness, of confusion. But it means nothing. I swear, it means nothing. For Emily, hearing that was like being punched in the stomach. The confession, even disguised as regret, was an undeniable betrayal. Everything she feared was now confirmed. The man she loved, with whom she had built a life, had betrayed her. Once? She repeated, her voice fragile, barely processing what he was saying. And the messages I saw, Ryan? The nights you came home late, the dinners. Was all that just once too? Ryan tried to protest, but Emily didn't stop. Don't come at me with cheap excuses. Do you think a simple sorry will erase all of this? Anger now exploded within her, burning away the sadness that had previously dominated. You lied to me. You cheated on me. He stepped forward quickly, hands raised, as if trying to calm her down, but Emily instinctively backed away, unable to bear the thought of being near him at that moment. Emily, please, listen to me. It was a mistake, I don't know what happened. I was confused. Things at work, the pressure. I never wanted to hurt you. He seemed genuinely remorseful, but to Emily, his words sounded hollow, like broken promises that held no value anymore. She laughed, a bitter and painful laugh, full of disbelief. Confused? Work pressure? Emily felt her body tremble. Is that what you're going to say? That it was all a mistake? That it was stress? How can that justify the fact that you destroyed our marriage, Ryan? Ryan lowered his head, unsure of what to say. He knew there were no justifications, and his silence only confirmed that. I will do whatever it takes to fix this, Emily. I will stop talking to her, I will dedicate myself to you, to us. We can get through this. Together. Ryan's voice was almost pleading, but Emily couldn't feel anything but a growing emptiness inside her. Together? She repeated, incredulous. Do you really think there's still in us after all this? After the lies, the betrayals? She stepped away from him, hugging her own body as if trying to protect herself from the overwhelming pain she felt. Silent tears began to stream down her face, and Ryan stepped forward, reaching out his hand, but Emily recoiled again, her eyes fixed on the floor. Don't touch me, she whispered, her voice breaking. Not now. The room was cold and wrapped in a silent darkness, broken only by Emily's sobs as she tried to maintain control over her emotions. She felt as if she were sinking into a sea of doubt, unsure how or if she could ever rise again. Emily. Ryan tried again, but she interrupted him, finally looking at him with tear-filled eyes, yet filled with a determination he didn't expect. You broke me, Ryan. Emily's words were like blades, cutting through the air between them. And I don't know if I can fix this. I don't know if I can forgive you. Ryan looked desperate, as if he saw the situation crumbling before him and didn't know how to hold it together. Tell me what I need to do, Emily. Please. I'll do anything. He seemed willing to beg, but Emily shook her head, feeling her heart tighten with every word. I don't know, Ryan. I don't know. She couldn't take it anymore. The weight of the situation was crushing her soul, and she needed space to breathe, to think. Without saying anything more, Emily left the room, leaving Ryan standing in the darkness, alone with his regrets. Emily hurried down the stairs, her heart racing and her breath coming in gasps. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if she were fleeing a nightmare but knowing there was no escaping reality. The house, once a refuge, now felt suffocating. She needed to get out, needed air. She slammed the front door open, feeling the cold Chicago wind touch her face. That icy breeze seemed to be the only thing keeping her anchored to sanity. She didn't know where to go, she just knew she couldn't stay. She grabbed her phone and, without thinking twice, called Sarah. Emily? Sarah's voice sounded alarmed on the other end. What happened? Emily could barely speak. Her throat was dry, the knot still tight. I need to get out of here. Can I come to your place? Of course, Em. Come now. I'm waiting for you, Sarah replied without hesitation. Emily knew she could count on her friend, but still, the shame of admitting her reality was overwhelming. Minutes later, she was in the car, driving through the dark, almost empty streets of the city. Chicago felt like a distant backdrop, the city lights and tall buildings passing her by like ghosts. The silence in the car was suffocating, only broken by the sound of the engine and the distant wail of sirens. Emily tried to hold back her tears, but her body betrayed her, and they flowed down her face, silent and steady. Arriving at Sarah's apartment, Emily could barely get out of the car. She was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. When Sarah opened the door and saw her friend's expression, she immediately hugged her without saying a word. Emily finally broke down, letting all the weight of betrayal, pain, and fear flow out in tears. I don't know what to do, Sarah, Emily whispered, still clinging to her friend. He admitted it. He said it was a mistake, but I can't think about how to fix this. Sarah led her to the sofa and made her sit down. She offered her a glass of water, trying to calm her. Sarah's apartment was small but cozy, with plants scattered around and travel photos on the walls. That warm environment contrasted sharply with the emotional chaos Emily felt inside. I know this seems unbearable right now, Sarah spoke gently but firmly. But you don't have to make any immediate decisions. Give yourself time. Breathe. You need to take care of yourself before anything else. Emily wiped her eyes with trembling hands, still reeling from the intensity of the situation. But how? Emily asked desperately. How do I get through this? I feel like I'm not the same anymore, like I've lost control of my life. He lied to me, he betrayed me. And now, everything feels empty. Sarah nodded slowly, understanding the abyss into which her friend was falling. I'm not going to tell you what to do, Em. That decision is yours. But you need time and space. Don't let his guilt pressure you. Ryan made his choice, and now you have the right to make yours. Sarah's words echoed in Emily's mind. She knew her friend was right, but the confusion inside her was still overwhelming. How could she simply move on? She loved Ryan. Or at least, she loved the man he was before everything fell apart. Emily's phone buzzed in her hand, bringing her back to the present. It was Ryan. He had sent several messages. Emily, please come back. We need to talk. I'm really sorry. I didn't want it to end like this. I know I messed up, but please give me a chance to fix things. I love you, Emily. I don't want to lose you. She looked at the messages, her heart tightening. He really seemed remorseful, but Emily didn't know if she could trust that. His words, so sweet now, had been replaced by lies for months. How could she believe him again? What did he say? Sarah asked, seeing the troubled look on Emily's face as she stared at her phone. He says he wants to fix things. That he loves me and it was just a mistake. Emily's voice wavered. But, how can I trust him after everything? How can I believe he will really change? Sarah sighed, clearly feeling the weight of that decision on her friend's shoulders. Trusting again after betrayal is almost impossible without a lot of honesty and effort. And you need to ask yourself, do you want to fix this? Do you want to fight for this marriage? Or have you already passed the point of no return? Emily stared at the floor, thinking about Sarah's words. She wished she could answer the question with certainty, but the truth was she didn't know. A part of her still clung to the past, to the memories of who Ryan was before all of this, while another part wanted to run away as fast as possible. She felt trapped between the love she still felt and the betrayal that tore her apart inside. The night dragged on slowly in Sarah's apartment. Emily managed to sleep only a few hours, waking several times amid conflicting thoughts. When the sun began to timidly shine through the window, she knew she needed to take action, even if it was small. The next morning, Emily gathered her things and thanked Sarah for her support. She still didn't know what she would do in the long run, but one thing was clear: she needed to face Ryan again and decide what to do with the truth she now knew. She returned home, her stomach in knots, as if she were heading into battle. Ryan was sitting on the couch, his expression haggard, his eyes fixed on the door as if he had been waiting for her all night. When Emily walked in, he stood up, nervous, unsure of what to say. Emily, Ryan began, but she raised her hand, signaling for silence. I'm not here to argue again, she said, her voice calm but firm. I came to tell you that I need some time. I don't know what we're going to do about this, about what you did. But I need to step away." Ryan was silent, processing her words, and although he was clearly shaken, he nodded slowly. "If that's what you need," he murmured. "I just want you to know that I will do everything I can to fix this, Emily. I love you, and I know I messed up. I'll give you the time you need, but I haven't given up on us." She looked at him, seeing the desperation in his eyes, but she felt an odd sense of serenity wash over her. The Ryan she knew felt like a distant shadow now. She simply sighed. "I need to do this for myself, Ryan. I don't know what will happen, but I can't keep going like this." With that, Emily grabbed her keys and left the house, not looking back. The cold Chicago wind enveloped her again as she closed the door, but this time, she felt a strange relief in her chest. She knew the journey was far from over, but at least she had taken the first step. The days that followed were lonely for Emily. After her decision to distance herself from Ryan, she began to avoid any communication with him. The temporary apartment she had rented in a quieter neighborhood of Chicago was modest but provided the space she desperately needed. The silence that filled the rooms gave her time to think but also sank her into a sea of memories and questions. Ryan, on the other hand, was trying to reach out. Messages, calls, even notes left at her old house, but Emily wasn't ready to deal with him. She knew she needed time to understand what she truly wanted. One afternoon, while organizing her things in the new apartment, her phone rang. It was Sarah. "Emily, how are you?" Sarah's voice sounded gentle, but there was a hint of concern. "I'm surviving, I guess." Emily sighed, sitting on the couch. "It still feels like a nightmare." "I can imagine." Sarah paused before continuing. "I've been thinking, don't you think you need more answers about what really happened? About that woman he got involved with?" The suggestion hit Emily hard. She had spent so many days trying to process the betrayal that she hadn't allowed herself to think deeply about who the other person was. And that left her even more confused. "I don't know, Sarah." Emily shook her head, as if her friend could see the gesture. "I think knowing more would just hurt me." "Maybe." Sarah paused, considering. "But what if knowing the truth helps you make a decision? Have you thought about whether he's still in contact with her or if this story goes much deeper than he told you?" Emily fell silent. She really didn't know how far Ryan's betrayal went. What he had told her could be just the tip of the iceberg, and that uncertainty was eating her alive. After hanging up with Sarah, a persistent thought took hold of her mind, discovering the truth. That night, Emily decided to take action. She knew she couldn't live in doubt any longer. She grabbed her laptop and, after a moment of hesitation, decided to investigate. She had seen the woman's number on Ryan's phone and copied it to search for more information. It wasn't something she was proud of, but she needed answers. After a few quick searches on social media, she found a profile that matched the number. Her name was Clara Jensen. She had photos on her profile of fancy dinners, travels, and a lifestyle that seemed to starkly contrast with what Emily imagined. Clara was young, elegant, and from the images she saw, she seemed to be involved with a social circle very different from Ryan's. Emily didn't recognize any of the places in the photos, but one thing caught her attention. There was a recent photo taken in a luxurious Chicago restaurant, Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse. And the date matched one of the nights Ryan had said he was working late. Emily's heart raced. She didn't know what to do with that information. But the need to find out more propelled her. If Ryan had been lying about the dinners and meeting Clara, she needed to know for sure. The next morning, Emily decided to put her plan into action. If Ryan was hiding more than she imagined, she couldn't just rely on his words. She felt a mix of fear and determination as she took her phone and sent Ryan a message. "Ryan, we need to talk. Can we meet at our usual cafe at 6 p.m.? She knew he wouldn't refuse. Since she had distanced herself, he had begged for a chance to explain himself. This time, it would be different. She didn't want just a conversation, she wanted answers, and she was ready to confront him with everything she discovered. Hours before the meeting, Emily decided to take one more step. It was time to go to the restaurant where Clara had posted the photo. It was a discreet place, and if Ryan had been there with her, someone might have seen them. Arriving at Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse, Emily took a deep breath before entering. The ambient lights were soft, with soothing background music. She walked up to the bar, where one of the waiters was busy cleaning glasses. "Excuse me," Emily began, trying to contain her nerves. "I'd like to know if you've worked here for a long time." The waiter, a friendly middle-aged man, nodded. "I've worked here for years." "Why?" Emily took out her phone and showed him the picture of Clara in the restaurant, trying not to reveal too much. "I'm looking for this woman. Do you remember seeing her around here? Maybe, with a man?" The waiter looked at the photo, and his expression of recognition was immediate. "Oh, yes, of course. She's been here several times in the past few months. Always with the same guy." He paused, as if trying to recall more details. "They always ordered an expensive wine. The guy was a bit older, in a suit." "Wait, let me think." Emily's heart raced. "Do you remember what he looked like?" she asked, trying to keep her composure. "Tall, brown hair." The waiter described, and Emily felt her blood run cold. He was describing Ryan. The confirmation hit Emily like a punch she wasn't ready to take. The suspicions she had been trying to deny were now clear and impossible to ignore. Ryan hadn't just betrayed her trust with a single night of weakness. He had been regularly meeting Clara, taking her to fancy restaurants while inventing lies for Emily. She thanked the waiter and quickly left the restaurant, feeling as if the world around her was crumbling. The lies were deeper than she had imagined. What else was he hiding? Arriving at the cafe where they had agreed to meet, Emily sat at a table by the window, watching the flow of people. She glanced at her watch, 5:55 p.m. Ryan would be arriving soon. And this time, she wouldn't let him lie. Emily sat at the cafe, her hands trembling on the table and her heart racing. The memories of the restaurant echoed in her mind. The waiter describing Ryan with Clara, the secret meetings he disguised with excuses about work. Every detail felt like a new stab in her chest. Emily knew that the meeting that night wouldn't be a simple conversation, it would be the moment of truth. At exactly 6 p.m., Ryan walked into the cafe. He looked nervous, with tense shoulders and a restless gaze, as if he already knew something serious awaited him. Upon seeing her, he forced a timid smile, but Emily remained serious, her eyes fixed on him. He approached the table, hesitating before sitting down. "Thanks for meeting me, Emily," he said in a low voice. "I know things are complicated, but I'm glad you gave me this chance." Emily didn't respond immediately. She observed him with a mix of sadness and anger. There was a time when Ryan's simple smile made her feel safe and loved. Now, it was hard to look at him without feeling the weight of the lies that separated them. "We need to be straightforward today, Ryan," Emily said, her voice firm. "No more lies. No more half-truths. I want the truth, the whole truth." Ryan hesitated for a moment but nodded slowly. He intertwined his fingers on the table, as if trying to calm himself. "Okay, Emily. I promise to be honest with you." She stared at him for a long moment, trying to decide where to start. She knew he would try to downplay the situation, so she decided to go straight to the point, using the information she already had. "I was at Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse today," Emily began, never taking her eyes off Ryan. "The waiter recognized you. He described you, Ryan. He said you've been there several times, always with the same woman. Clara, right?" Ryan paled. His entire body stiffened, and his breathing became shallow. The look of shock and guilt on his face was unmistakable. He knew he had been caught. "Emily, He tried to speak, but the words seemed to get stuck in his throat. The lie was no longer an option. Emily clenched her fists under the table, feeling the anger boil inside her. The words came out more forcefully than she intended. "You lied to me all along. It wasn't just once, it wasn't a momentary mistake. You were with her several times, Ryan. You took her out to fancy dinners while telling me you were swamped with work. Did you think I would never find out?" Ryan closed his eyes, running his hands over his face, as if trying to find the right words to respond. But Emily wasn't willing to wait for apologies or empty justifications. She was furious. "How could you?" Emily's voice trembled, now filled with pain. "How could you betray me like this and still lie to my face? All those months, while I tried to save what was left of our marriage, you were with her." Ryan finally raised his eyes to her, and the expression on his face was a mix of regret and desperation. "Emily, listen to me. I know I was wrong. I know I lied, and nothing I say now will fix this." He paused, his voice breaking. "But I swear, I want to fix this. I don't want to lose you." Emily let out a bitter laugh, unable to believe what she was hearing. "Fix? You think you can just say you're sorry and that everything will be fine? It doesn't work like that, Ryan. Not after everything you've done." She felt tears welling in her eyes but refused to cry in front of him. "Not this time." The knot in her throat tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "I dedicated myself to this marriage. I trusted you. And what did you do? Betrayed that trust, lied to me repeatedly. And it wasn't just once, it wasn't an isolated mistake. It was a choice you made, over and over." Ryan ran his hands through his hair, clearly shaken. "I know, Emily, I know," he murmured, his voice heavy with guilt. "I was an idiot. I was lost, confused. But none of that means I don't love you. I still love you, Emily. I know I messed everything up, but I want a chance to fix it." Emily shook her head, sadness overtaking her voice. "If you truly loved me, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have lied all those months, meeting another woman while I sat at home alone, believing your excuses. Love isn't this, Ryan. Love is trust, it's respect. And you broke all of that." Ryan looked on the verge of despair. He leaned over the table, trying to touch Emily's hand, but she recoiled. I know I made mistakes, but give me a chance to show I can change." His voice was almost a plea. "Please, Emily. I would do anything to have you back." Emily stared at him, and the silence that followed was long and heavy. Finally, she took a deep breath and spoke, her voice cold and determined. "I've given you chances, Ryan. I've given you all my love, my support, my trust. And you threw it away. I won't continue like this anymore. I won't hurt myself trying to save something you destroyed." Ryan opened his mouth to speak, but Emily interrupted him. "I want a divorce." The words came out quickly, definitively. Ryan looked stunned, as if he hadn't expected to hear that so directly. The silence between them was deafening. "Emily, no." He tried to protest, his voice choked. "It can't be like this. We can work this out. We can try, please." Emily stood up, gathering her things, unable to look at him any longer. Tears finally began to stream down her face, but she knew it was the right thing to do. "I've already decided, Ryan," she said firmly, even though her voice was trembling. "I need to move on. And you need to face the consequences of your choices." She walked away from the table, heading toward the cafe's exit. Ryan remained there, seated, with eyes filled with guilt and despair, watching the woman he loved walk out of his life. And this time, he knew there was no turning back. Emily stepped out onto the streets of Chicago, the cold wind blowing against her face, mixing with her tears. The weight of the decision was enormous, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was regaining control of her life. She knew the path ahead would be difficult, but now, she was ready to move forward, alone. The days following the confrontation with Ryan were a mix of relief and pain for Emily. Each morning felt like a new challenge, but there was a small sense of freedom slowly growing within her. Despite the devastation the divorce request had caused, she knew it was the only choice possible for herself. Sarah, as always, was by her side, offering unwavering support. In the first few days, Emily couldn't bear to be alone for too long, so she spent long hours at Sarah's apartment, talking or simply sitting in silence, trying to process everything that had happened. "You're being so strong, Em," Sarah constantly reminded her as they sipped coffee together. "I know this is hell, but you're doing what's right for you. And that's what matters." Emily, however, was still wrapped in a cloud of doubts and pain. The word divorce felt surreal, as if it were too far removed from the life she had imagined. There were moments when she questioned her decision, moments of weakness when she remembered the good times with Ryan, the man he used to be. But then the memories of betrayal would surface, bringing with them a wave of renewed pain. She tried to return to a simple routine, seeking ways to fill the emptiness she felt. She spent more time outdoors, walking through Chicago, observing people coming and going, immersed in the chaos of the city. The cold October wind began to blow more strongly, leaves falling from the trees, and Emily felt part of this cycle of renewal, where something old was breaking apart for something new to emerge. On one of those walks, Emily passed by a dance studio. The distant sound of soft music echoed along the sidewalk and caught her attention. Without thinking, she approached and, through the large glass window, saw a group of people practicing a simple choreography. They laughed, stumbled, and seemed to be having fun. For a moment, Emily remembered how much she loved dancing when she was younger, how dance had always been a way to escape, to feel free. She didn't hesitate. She entered the studio and was greeted by a young instructor with a warm smile, who quickly invited her to join a trial class. Emily, hesitant at first, accepted the invitation. The first class was liberating. Although she was rusty, her movements soon began to flow again, and she found herself lost in the rhythm of the music, forgetting, for brief moments, all the pain she carried. Each step was a reminder that she was still capable of feeling, expressing herself, living. After the class, while drying off with a towel, the instructor approached her. "You have a knack for this," the young woman said, smiling. "Have you taken classes before?" Emily smiled back, a shy but sincere smile. "Yes, many years ago. But it's been a long time since I danced." "Well, you should come back," the instructor said enthusiastically. "We have classes every week. It could be a good way to relax and reconnect with what you love." Emily nodded, feeling a lightness in her chest that she hadn't experienced in weeks. As she left the studio, the Chicago sky was tinged orange by the sunset, and for the first time in a long time, Emily felt a spark of hope. Perhaps dancing again was the way to rediscover who she was, to rebuild herself away from the ruins of her marriage. But despite all her efforts to move on, the divorce process still loomed over her like a shadow. Ryan continued to try to contact her, sending messages and calling, begging her to reconsider. He seemed determined to reverse the situation, but Emily stood firm in her decision. With each passing day, it became clearer that the Ryan she had loved was a thing of the past, and that staying in that relationship would only be an exercise in self-destruction. One afternoon, as Emily reviewed the divorce papers the lawyer had sent, her phone rang. It was Ryan. For a moment, she almost ignored the call, as she had been doing for the past few weeks. But something inside her made her answer this time. "Hello?" Her voice came out low and cautious. "Emily, thank you for picking up." Ryan's voice was filled with anxiety. "Please, listen to me. I know you've already decided, but I need you to hear me out one more time." Emily sighed, already weary before hearing what he had to say. "Ryan, we've talked about this. I'm not changing my mind." "I know." He interrupted quickly, his voice choked. "I know I can't undo what I've done, but I wanted to meet you one last time. Not to discuss the marriage, but to explain myself properly. So you can understand what led me to this." "Understand?" Emily replied, irritated. "There's nothing to understand, Ryan. You chose to betray our trust. And that ended everything. Please, Emily." Ryan pleaded. "Just meet me one more time. I promise I won't ask you to change your mind about the divorce. I just want you to know what really happened. And then you never have to see me again if you don't want to." Emily hesitated. A part of her didn't want to hear Ryan anymore, didn't want to prolong the pain. But another part, a curious part perhaps seeking some emotional closure, felt it might be important to listen to what he had to say. Even if it changed nothing, it could be the last piece of this puzzle that was consuming her. "Fine," she finally said, feeling her stomach churn. "Tomorrow, at the same cafe. At 6 p.m. Ryan thanked her and hung up. Emily remained there, holding the phone tightly, a mix of anxiety and fear flooding her thoughts. She didn't know what he would say, but something told her this conversation would be different from all the previous ones. The next day, Emily arrived at the cafe before the agreed time, feeling her hands sweat and her heart race. She sat at the same table where she had asked for the divorce, now waiting for another revelation. She was about to discover something that would further change her perception of everything that had happened. When Ryan entered the cafe, he looked more haggard than ever. The deep dark circles under his eyes and the unshaven beard indicated sleepless nights. He sat down across from her, his eyes avoiding hers for a few seconds before finally speaking. "Emily, before we start, I want to say I'm sorry for everything I've put you through," he began, his voice low, almost broken. "But there's something you need to know, something that will explain why I did what I did." Emily watched him in silence, waiting. "It wasn't just about Clara," Ryan finally said, his voice trembling. I'm in a bigger problem than you can imagine." Emily felt a chill run down her spine when she heard Ryan's words. What did he mean by a bigger problem? For weeks, she had thought that betrayal was the worst thing he could have done. Now, the idea of something even more serious made her heart tighten. She leaned slightly forward, trying to stay calm. "What are you talking about, Ryan?" she asked, her voice firm, but inside, she felt panic rising. Ryan took a deep breath, looking at his hands intertwined on the table. It was as if he was struggling to find the strength to confess what he had been hiding. "I don't know where to start," he murmured, still avoiding direct eye contact. "When I told you I was overwhelmed at work, that was true. But work wasn't the only thing pressing down on me." Emily remained silent, waiting for him to continue. She felt a mix of anger and curiosity. She couldn't imagine what he was about to reveal. "I got involved in something dangerous. And it started before Clara even showed up." Ryan finally looked up, and Emily saw a glint of fear in his eyes, something she had never seen before. "I was having financial problems. I made some bad investments and, instead of telling you, I tried to solve it on my own. But I ended up in debt more than I could handle." Emily frowned, feeling a new wave of indignation. "And you thought hiding this from me was the solution?" she asked, a hint of sarcasm in her voice. "Instead of talking to me, you chose a path that destroyed us?" Ryan shook his head, defeated. "I know, Emily, I know. And that was the biggest mistake of my life. I was desperate. I started borrowing money from the wrong people and got involved with dangerous people." Emily's anger subsided for a moment, replaced by a sense of alertness. Dangerous people? What was he trying to say? "What kind of people, Ryan?" she asked, now feeling a knot form in her stomach. He hesitated, looking down again, clearly ashamed. "I got involved in an illegal gambling scheme," he said, his voice barely audible. "They promised me I could get the money back quickly, that everything would be fine. But things got out of control. I lost much more than I expected, and when I couldn't pay what I owed, the threats started." Emily was speechless, processing what she had just heard. She expected lies and betrayal, but she never imagined Ryan was involved in something so serious, something that could put both their lives at risk. "Threats?" Her voice trembled. "What kind of threats?" Ryan took a deep breath before continuing, clearly reluctant to expose all the details. "They started pressuring me, saying that if I didn't pay, they would come after you." He looked directly into Emily's eyes now, and she saw genuine terror on his face. "That's why I started distancing myself from you, making up excuses. I didn't want you to be close to me when things got worse." Emily felt an even stronger chill. Was Ryan saying her life was in danger? "And where does Clara fit into this?" she asked, trying to stay calm but feeling her heart race. "Was she part of this scheme too?" Ryan shook his head. "No. She has nothing to do with this." He sighed. "I met her by chance, at one of those dinners where I was trying to maintain the appearance that things were normal. Clara was an escape. A way to forget the disaster I had created." He paused, trying to find the right words. "She didn't know anything about what was happening, and despite everything, I never intended to get involved with her for real. But I made that mistake, and now everything has crumbled. Emily listened to all of this, feeling torn between anger at the betrayal and shock at the gravity of the situation. She tried to process what Ryan was saying, but it all felt too surreal. You're telling me you got involved with criminals, that you put me in danger, and still thought the best solution was to lie to me and betray me? Her voice was filled with disbelief. How can you think anything justifies what you did? Ryan looked defeated, with no energy left to argue. He looked at Emily with eyes full of guilt and regret. I was lost, Emily. I tried to solve everything on my own, and in the process, I ruined everything. His voice faltered. But I swear, I never wanted to hurt you. I just didn't know how to get out of it. Emily felt tears welling in her eyes, but she held them back. The pain was overwhelming, but there was something stronger now, the need to protect herself. She looked at Ryan, the man she once loved, and realized that what remained between them was just a pile of mistakes and betrayals. There was no going back. I don't know what to say, Emily murmured, feeling exhausted. I don't know what to think. All of this is too much. She ran her hand through her hair, trying to ease the tension. But one thing is certain, Ryan, I can't be part of your life anymore. You chose this path. You chose to push me away, to deceive me. Now you will have to deal with the consequences. Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but Emily interrupted him. And no, I'm not going to wait for you to fix this. I can't. I've spent too much time trying to understand how you could do this to me, trying to find a way to save what was left of our marriage. But there's nothing left to save. She stood up from the table, grabbing her bag. No matter what you say now, I will proceed with the divorce. And you will deal with your problems on your own. Ryan watched her in silence, tears starting to form in his eyes. But he knew there was nothing more he could say. Emily was determined, and he finally understood that he had lost her forever. Emily turned her back and left the cafe, feeling the cold wind of Chicago hit her face, but this time, the cold felt like a kind of liberation. The streets were bustling, but to Emily, everything seemed to move in slow motion. She walked aimlessly for a while, reflecting on everything Ryan had revealed. Her heart still ached, but somehow she felt she was closer to finding peace. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that from that moment on, it would be for herself. No more lies, no more betrayals, no more burden of carrying someone she could no longer trust. When she arrived at her apartment, she picked up her phone and called Sarah. Hi, Em. How did it go? Sarah asked, concerned. It was hard, but... I needed to hear it, Emily replied, her voice calm. He's in a much deeper hole than I imagined. But now I know I made the right choice. Sarah sighed on the other end of the line. I'm proud of you, Em. It's going to be tough, but I'm here for whatever you need. Emily smiled, feeling her friend's support come through the phone like a hug. Thank you, Sarah. I think I'm going to need more dance classes to clear all this confusion from my head. I'll be there with you, Sarah replied, with a smile that could be heard. Emily hung up, feeling a new lightness in her heart. Things were far from easy, but she knew she was on the right path. The pain of the whole process was still intense, but now, for the first time in a long time, she could see a light at the end of the tunnel. Winter began to settle in Chicago, bringing shorter days and longer nights. The streets were covered with a light layer of snow, and the biting cold made Emily hurry every time she stepped outside. But despite the change in season and the sense of isolation that winter brought, she started to feel a new energy within herself, something she hadn't experienced in months. The divorce process was moving forward. Each new document she signed felt like a firmer step toward her new beginning. Ryan hadn't made any more desperate attempts at reconciliation since their last conversation. He respected Emily's decision, and she imagined that, at last, he was dealing with his own problems. Still, Emily couldn't help but think about what she had discovered. The revelation about the debts, Ryan's involvement with criminals, and the threats had shaken her perceptions of everything. Now, in her moments of silence, she wondered if Ryan was really safe, if he could handle everything without putting more people at risk. But that concern was soon replaced by memories of the betrayals and lies. She knew she couldn't let herself be drawn back into the desire to fix what was already broken. Even so, there was something more at stake now, the need to start over, to rebuild herself after everything that had happened. Sarah, as always, was her pillar during this time. They spent many nights together, talking about the future, about the good things still to come. In one of those conversations, Sarah brought up an idea that Emily was still hesitant to accept. Why don't you do something new? Something just for you? Sarah suggested one night while they were watching a movie. Have you thought about changing things up a bit, maybe even moving to a different city? You know, a complete fresh start? Emily chuckled softly, not taking her eyes off the screen. I can barely think about tomorrow, let alone such a big change, Sarah. But the idea planted by her friend lingered in her mind. She had already begun to change. The dance had become an important part of her routine, something that made her feel alive again. The simple act of moving to the rhythm of the music, without thinking about anything else, was a form of liberation she hadn't found anywhere else. After weeks of attending dance classes, Emily felt much more confident. The classes helped her step out of her comfort zone, and little by little, she began to meet new people and socialize again. For the first time, since her life began to fall apart, Emily found herself genuinely smiling, without the weight of the past on her shoulders. One afternoon, after a particularly lively class, the instructor approached her while she was packing her things. Emily, you're dancing really well, the instructor said with a smile. I have a proposal for you. We're organizing a small performance in a month, and I think you should participate. Emily, surprised, laughed a little, feeling nervous. A performance? She asked, incredulous. I don't know if I'm ready for that. The instructor smiled confidently. Of course you are. It will be something simple, just for the group here. But I think you should show how much you've grown. It'll be a great way to mark this new phase of your life, don't you think? Emily hesitated, but something inside her lit up at the idea. Participating in a performance? That seemed unthinkable months ago, but now it might be just what she needed to prove to herself that she was capable of reinventing herself. I will think about it, Emily said, still uncertain but with a shy smile. The days went on, and as the divorce process progressed, Emily found herself increasingly focused on her dance, her personal projects, and the future she was starting to glimpse, even if gradually. The pain of betrayal was still there, of course, but now it felt distant, like a shadow beginning to dissipate with time. That month, Emily also did something she had been putting off for weeks. She went to the apartment she shared with Ryan to collect the last of her things. The place felt different now, empty and lifeless, as if it were just a memory of a time that would never return. She walked through the rooms, looking at the walls and the furniture, and felt a slight pang of sadness, but also a strange sense of closure. While packing the last items into a box, she found an old photo of them together, taken during a trip they made shortly after their wedding. They were smiling, embracing, full of hope for the future. Emily stared at the picture for a long moment before deciding to put it away in a drawer. It was no longer the time to hold on to the past. When she finally left the apartment, Emily knew she wouldn't be back. She was ready to move on. A few days later, Emily received an unexpected message. It was from Ryan. Emily, I just wanted to let you know that I've managed to resolve the debts. Everything is under control now. I hope you're doing well. She looked at the message, unsure of how to react. She no longer felt the need to respond, nor the pressure to resolve something that was no longer her problem. She simply blocked the number and set her phone aside. Ryan was part of the past, and now her focus was on herself. That night, Emily made a decision. She sent a message to her dance instructor. I want to participate in the performance. I'm ready. And with that, something inside her ignited. Maybe this was the new beginning she had been waiting for. On the day of the performance, Emily was nervous. The small group of friends and classmates gathered in the studio, and the soft lights created an intimate yet relaxed atmosphere. She wore a simple outfit that made her feel confident, something she hadn't felt in a long time. As the music began, Emily let herself get carried away. Each step, each movement was a silent declaration of her strength, of her resilience. And when the last note of the music played, applause echoed through the studio. Emily smiled, a sense of liberation washing over her body. There, on that makeshift little stage, she had left behind everything that had held her back. The betrayal, the pain, the fear. All of it was now part of a story she would no longer carry. When she stepped off the stage, Sarah was there, waiting for her with a tight hug. "You were amazing," Sarah said, emotional. Emily smiled, feeling a lightness she hadn't experienced in months. "Thank you, Sarah," she replied, her eyes shining. "I think I'm finally ready to start over." As they left the studio together, the cold Chicago wind blew against their faces, but this time, Emily felt only the gentle breeze of a new beginning. Days passed since the night of the performance, and slowly, Emily found her place in the world again. The harsh Chicago winter gave way to spring, and the city, once cold and gloomy, was now blooming with colors and life. In a way, Emily was blooming too. The past, with its betrayals and disappointments, still existed, but it was no longer a prison. She had made peace with the story of her marriage and, more importantly, with her decision to move on. The divorce process was finalized, and Emily felt relieved when the lawyer called to inform her that everything was officially concluded. There were no more conversations with Ryan, no attempts at reconciliation or final apologies. The separation, which had once felt like an endless storm, had transformed into a quiet calm. The dance studio continued to be an important part of Emily's life. She threw herself into the classes, becoming a regular presence and even helping to organize more events. Dance, which had started as a simple distraction, was now her renewed passion. At the same time, she began to allow herself to explore new possibilities, make new friendships, and reconnect with who she was beyond being a wife and a victim of betrayal. One afternoon, while walking through a park near the studio, Emily sat on a bench and watched the children playing, families picnicking, and couples strolling hand in hand. She felt an inner peace that she hadn't experienced in a long time. Life was no longer a series of insurmountable challenges. Now, there was room for hope, for dreams. As she looked around, reflecting on everything that had happened, her phone vibrated. It was a message from Sarah. "I'm at the cafe next to the studio. Come meet me when you can." Emily smiled, already feeling the usual joy of being with her friend. She walked to the cafe, where she found Sarah sitting at an outdoor table, with 2 cups of coffee and a slice of chocolate cake waiting for her. "You read my mind, as always," Emily joked as she sat down. "Always ready to feed the soul and the stomach." Sarah laughed, pushing the slice of cake toward Emily. The two friends talked for hours, reminiscing about recent moments and dreaming about the future. Emily knew that Sarah had been instrumental in her healing process. In the darkest moments, it was Sarah who reminded her that life still had so much to offer, that there was light on the other side of pain. "You're different, Em," Sarah suddenly said, looking at her with a smile. "I can see it in your eyes. That weight you were carrying, it's not there anymore." Emily smiled, thinking about how much she had changed. "I feel different. Stronger, lighter." She paused, looking at the city around her. "I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to find out." Sarah nodded, looking proud. "And you deserve everything good that future has to offer." A few weeks later, an unexpected invitation arrived for Emily. The dance studio where she had spent so many important moments was organizing a big public performance, and this time, they wanted Emily to be part of a larger choreography, something that would require more commitment and dedication. The idea of performing on a bigger stage, in front of an unknown audience, frightened Emily at first. But at the same time, she felt an excitement she hadn't experienced since the beginning of her journey in dance. That invitation was more than just a performance, it was an opportunity to celebrate the path she had taken, the growth she had achieved, and, above all, the freedom she now felt. In the days leading up to the performance, Emily spent hours rehearsing with the group, becoming increasingly confident in her movements and her ability to express herself through dance. The applause she received at the previous performance had been just the beginning. Now, she was ready to show the world, and herself, that she had overcome the shadows of the past. On the night of the big performance, the theater was packed. Nervous, Emily looked out at the audience and spotted Sarah, sitting in the front row, smiling and giving her signs of support. The music started, and Emily, along with the group, began the choreography they had practiced for weeks. Each movement was an expression of her journey, the falls, the internal battles, the moments of weakness, and finally, the resilience. The dance flowed like a silent narrative of overcoming, a declaration that she had freed herself from the chains that held her back. When the music came to an end and the stage lights dimmed, the sound of applause filled the theater. Emily, breathless, looked at the audience and saw unfamiliar faces applauding enthusiastically. But it was Sarah's smile, shining in the midst of the crowd, that made her realize how much she had accomplished. After the performance, Sarah rushed backstage, where she found Emily still radiant from the adrenaline of the show. "You were amazing," Sarah exclaimed, hugging her tightly. "I never doubted you." Emily laughed, feeling her heart light and filled with indescribable joy. "I finally did something just for me, Sarah. And it was the best decision I ever made." The two friends walked out of the theater together, strolling through the illuminated streets of Chicago, the spring air bringing a sense of new beginnings. Emily knew that this moment marked the start of a new phase in her life, a phase where she no longer carried the burdens of the past but, instead, embraced the possibilities of the future with courage and determination. When they reached the park, Sarah pointed to the sky. "Look, Em. The stars are so bright tonight." Emily gazed at the starry sky, feeling small in the face of its vastness, but at the same time, powerful in light of the journey she had taken. She smiled. "I think it's a sign that the best is yet to come." And for the first time in a long time, Emily truly believed it. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share. Thank you for following along, and see you next time.